Good evening. I hereby call to order the action session of the Board of School Commissioners for Thursday, September 24th. Would everyone please stand and join me in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance? Before we get started this evening, I want to note, if you look to my left, you'll note that it isn't Superintendent Alicia Johnson with us this evening. She is dealing with a family emergency, and I want to share that our thoughts and our prayers go out to Superintendent Johnson and her family as they deal with this matter. I also want to say Superintendent Johnson has been in touch with, I think, each and every one of the commissioners over the course of this period, and I know has been interacting with the staff, but we have an ample substitute in Andrew Struop, who will be performing superintendent duties for today's meeting, particularly as we're moving forward with our school year 2020-21 reopening plans. So Andrew is our Chief of Strategy and Planning and will represent the administration this evening in the superintendent's absence. I'll also note that we again have several commissioners participating by phone pursuant to Governor Holcomb's executive orders and corresponding guidance from the Indiana Public Access Counselor. I'll remind my colleagues on the phone, if you would, please mute your microphones when they're not speaking to minimize feedback or interference. Mr. Mulholland, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Arnold.
Here.
Commissioner Gore.
Here.
Commissioner Moore.
Here.
Commissioner Slack.
Here.
Secretary Collins.
Present.
Vice President Hawkins.
Present.
President O'Connor.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Mulholland. We'll now adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Reviewing the agenda, are there any requests for changes to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
So move.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. Moving to special recognitions. We don't have any formal special recognitions to honor this evening, but I want again to thank and really to highlight the extraordinary efforts our students, teachers, staff, and parents are making during this beginning of the 2021 school year. I know the disruptions and the uncertainty related to COVID-19 have been a burden on everyone, and I continue to be amazed at the resiliency of our community's response. I know we all look forward to the day when things return to normal, whatever that normal may be, but I appreciate that our community has risen and worked together to meet the challenges and the needs of this moment. I'm also proud of my colleagues here at the IPS leadership team, especially our parents and our teachers, for all the work they're putting in to make difficult circumstances successful. Moving on to opening comments. Does any commissioner wish to offer any opening comments this evening? And I'll start with our commissioners on the phone. Does anybody on the phone wish to offer opening comments this evening? Hearing none. Either of our other commissioners who are with us this evening in person? Hearing none, we'll move on. Our public comments have been submitted electronically to minimize the risk of exposure for members of the public sharing the same microphone at the podium. We'll continue to receive public comment through our online portal. The public comment period was activated on Monday, September 14th, and remained open until 4 p.m. today. We received 9 written submissions, all of which are posted in board docs and item 3.02 and are available for review by the media and the public. Moving on to the consent agenda. In section 4, are there any questions or requests to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments? Not. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. There are no board reports this evening, so I'll now turn the agenda over to Mr. Strope for the superintendent reports.
Great, thank you, Commissioner O'Connor. So for our first item, item 6.01, I would like to welcome Principal Faulkner, the proud principal of Carl Wilde School 79, to the podium for the school spotlight.
Good evening. I'm Amanda Faulkner, the proud principal of Carl Wilde School 79, and my assistant principal, Tyler Heims, is with me as well. Next slide. For our overview, we're going to tell you who we are, some of our instructional initiatives, our community partnerships, and our key data points. Mr. Carl Wilde was born in 1888. He studied law at the Indiana University and Yale in Indianapolis. Wilde was an active member of several legal organizations, a leader in service clubs, and an enthusiastic participant in literacy endeavors. He contributed to the success of schools in Indianapolis as the president of the Board of School Commissioners. Who we are, we're grades K through 6. We currently have 617 students enrolled in our building. We have 66 staff members, and we're the largest elementary in the K through 6 learning community. Sorry. We also have the largest ESL population in the K through 6 learning community. We also hold 6.79% of all English language learners for the district, and we have 363 total ESL students in our building.
Good evening, I'm Tyler Heims. I'm the proud assistant principal of Carl Wilde School 79. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our instructional initiatives in the building. So this is my second year as assistant principal, working alongside Mrs. Faulkner. In year one, we really focused on improving the culture and climate in our building. The student culture, we wanted to build an environment where students can learn and thrive. For staff, we wanted to make sure we build the right team and support our staff to learn and grow. So we feel really good about what we accomplished in year one. And now heading into year two, as an administrative team, we're looking more at the instructional levers and using those to move the needle in our building. And primarily what that means for us this year is we're going to be focusing on using our curriculum with fidelity. So as you know, we recently adopted HMH into reading curriculum for the elementary and math Eureka. So for one area of growth for us as a building, we know, looking at last year, was the rigor that we were providing in our classrooms. And so we feel like focusing on this fidelity to the program is going to help us improve in that area. And so we've done a lot for the HMH into reading so far this year. Our teachers have jumped all into all the professional development that's been provided by the district, which has been great. Our teachers really been digging into all of the resources that are out there for HMH during our PLC times that we have on a weekly basis. As a school, we've revamped our master schedule so that it fits the different components of the HMH curriculum, and we can make sure we're hitting all those different pieces. And then for math, for Eureka, our teachers are teaching those 45 to 60-minute lessons every day with fidelity. It's fun to see them collect that formative assessment data and watch students submit their answers on Schoology for the exit tickets and those formative assessments. And so our expectation as an administration is that teachers are using these curriculum with fidelity. We've been using that word fidelity a lot this school year, and we feel really good about what we're doing so far this year and providing students the rigorous instruction that they deserve. Additionally, under curriculum and instruction, we are lucky to have added a new position, hired a rock star instructional coach who has helped us use data to drive our instruction this school year. So some new initiatives for us as a school related to data-driven instruction has been, we've implemented a master data spreadsheet, which is a one-stop shop for all of the data for all of our students that our whole staff contributes to and keeps up to date all year. So everything from NWA data to previous iLearn, iRead data, all the formative assessment data that we're collecting. It's a big spreadsheet that our whole staff contributes to. We also have classroom data walls this year that kind of summarizes all of our assessment data as we go and tracks our progress, and it's visual and posted for students to see. So it's good to get those students invested and understand and really invested in their personal data. And then also, we have PLC and co-planning meetings 3 times a week that our teachers are participating in for 45 minutes.
Some exciting technology integration. Besides the document cameras, the microphones, the iPads, and the Chromebooks that everybody else has, we have some amazing teachers who took advantage of quarantine, and they did a donor's choose, and they were able to get a robot for every general ed classroom in our building, and we're going to begin a robotics club. We also have 2 teachers who took initiative during quarantine and looked into the Girls Who Code Club, and they have spent lots of time planning. Their roommates already, so they're quarantining together, and they're going to be able to roll out a Girls Who Code Club as soon as we're able to do those after-school activities.
One thing that we feel like is somewhat unique to our building is our related arts team. We're able to offer our students 5 45-minute related arts classes. So we give all of our elementary students, they attend music, PE, art, technology, and library every week, every day, which is awesome. We have a really strong team, and it's fun to see the students come out of those related arts classes, sharing, excited, having fun. That's one thing that we've really challenged our related arts team to do this year, is to make it the most fun part of the day for our kids. Additionally, we know that science and social studies standards are integrated and embedded into the HMH curriculum, but that doesn't always necessarily replicate what our students are going to see on iLearn. So we've asked our related arts team to take some of that responsibility from our homeroom teachers, and so they are this year integrating science and social studies standards, doing one thematic unit or one project per semester for our tested grade levels in 4 through 6. And so we're really excited about that new initiative this year with our related arts team. Community partnerships, some community partnerships that we've had. We are fortunate as a school to have a lot of community partnerships over the years. Unfortunately, with the disruption, we've had to pause some of those, but 2 of them that we've been able to continue on despite COVID have been with Connection Point Church and also the St. Florian Center. So Connection Point has, over the years, provided lots of support to our building in terms of money and grant dollars for our teachers and clothes and food. And so what we've been able to do from back in March all the way through the summer up until now is we've been able to continue our food pantry. It has been a drive-through pantry up until this point, but we've been servicing 24 families from both our school and Clarence Farrington School 61. So it's good to see that continue, and we really appreciate all the hard work that Connection Point out of Brownsburg has been putting into our food pantry. And we look forward to opening up our doors back in person here when we can. And then St. Florian Center, they sponsor our Firefighters Club, which is a really awesome club that does a lot of great work. We have firefighter Tony and firefighter Mike, who lead our kids through a series of lessons and different activities. It's always been our most popular club in the school, and we've been able to continue that virtually here this school year. Firefighter Mike and firefighter Tony lead them through character building lessons. They help them stay motivated with their schoolwork. They give incentives for good grades, and it's just a really awesome club that's fun to be a part of and fun to sit through and see all the good work that they do.
Our teacher retention, I took over in December of 2019 as principal. As when we moved into the year 2019-2020, we were able to improve our retention rate by 16% for teachers. Our average attendant rate since September 7th has been 87.8%. We have visited 100% of our classrooms during virtual teaching. We've seen reading, we've seen math, we've seen morning meetings, we've seen it all. We have 82% of our teachers that come into the building daily. That's 47 out of 58, and they do their virtual teaching from the building. We also have served 2,055 students and 5,317 meals this summer from June 8th to August 1st. And we've served 671 total meals from August 17th till September 9th. And that's Carl Wilde.
We'll start questions with Commissioner Collins, and then I'll lean over to the phone here in a minute to check with any commissioners who are on the phone.
I want to commend you for using the inspiration and the talents of your teachers to see that they're starting a robotics club and they tapped into Donors Choose. And I would hope that all the principals use the talents that their teachers have, and I commend you on that.
Thank you.
I'm wondering about, with the new social studies standards that you mentioned, that how are you introducing equitable about history?
So we're going to use the Indiana state standards that are particular to that grade level. And the related arts teachers will use time with their general ed teachers, ESL teachers, special education teachers. They all meet in co-planning, and they're going to develop the projects all together. So it will be grade level. Oh, and the Racial Equity Committee also.
Any commissioner on the phone have any questions?
I just have one. It's Commissioner Gore. Thank you very much for coming tonight. It sounds like you're doing well at your school, even during these unprecedented times. I was looking at your firefighters club. Are they, and I didn't hear if you did say it, I'm sorry. Is this club led by a fire department or any, well, not the department, but some firefighter from a fire department that comes over and works with the students? Being that I know one of our high schools offers a firefighting class, which is Tech High School, and thought that would be a good kind of lead-in for that.
They're retired, right? Yeah, ours is a little different. Ours is through the St. Florian Center, and they're retired firefighters. So they aren't actually teaching firefighting techniques or strategies. They're doing more leadership and academic support and behavior support for our 4th through 6th graders.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the phone?
I don't have any questions. It's Commissioner Slack, but I just want to say thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Arnold. Kudos to them, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you, President O'Connor. Thank you both for your presentation. And I noticed, excuse me, the attendance rate, I think on slide 6, average attendance rate for September 7th through 21 was 87%. And so I'm curious if you can share sort of what, I know that the first sort of step was device distribution, then attendance, or well, somewhere between device distribution and attendance was, kids being able to log on and be able to show up and be present, introductions, we just had pit day, et cetera. And so I'm curious just if you can maybe share just a few of the approaches that you implemented, because 87.8 is probably pretty close to where you would have been pre-pandemic, I assume. So I'm just curious about sort of what are some of the successes or takeaways that you saw, or where you might have iterated or shifted your approach to reach that rate of 87.8% so far.
One success that we did, we hired a technology teacher for this year. That was my idea before pre-COVID. I have no idea. Someone told me this was coming, but we hired a technology teacher. He has a Google Voice number. He's available 24/7, although he only goes to school hours now. But at the beginning of school, he was getting lots of calls in the evening. He provides, that's our on-site support. We also have our classified staff who come in daily, social distance, of course, but they do have on-site support for our family members that feel that they need to come in because they're not getting what they need over the phone. Another thing that we've done for attendance is Connection Point, our partner, had donated a video game. I can't remember, what is it? It's a video game that we were going to give last May as a prize, and we had not used that yet, so we're using that now. So kids who have 100% attendance for the week, they get a ticket, and their teacher shows them virtually their ticket with their name on it. We're going to put those tickets in a hat. When they come back, we'll have a community meeting community meeting, more than likely virtually, but we will pull from that hat to give the video game away. And our social services team has done a lot of home visits. I go and knock on doors. I have 3 friends that like to see me daily who don't believe that I'll come every day, and I come every day and knock on their door, and it usually just takes a door knock and then they're on. Strategies.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? If not, Principal Faulkner, thank you so much. Wonderful report.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you both. For our next item, 6.02, I'll turn over to Dr. Morgan, our Chief Academic Officer.
Good evening. Tonight we wanted to bring to you an update on our post-secondary pathways. And so one of the things you guys know is we've been really trying to make sure that we have high-quality post-secondary pathways for all of our high school students, actually really starting from the middle grades through high school, so that they have viable options that lead to both certification and college. And so tonight we have Jennifer O'Shea, who is our post-secondary readiness officer, and Jamal Smith, who is director of strategic partnerships for IU Health, to give a little presentation on an update on our IU Health Fellowship. And this is one of those high-quality post-secondary pathways that they've been working on for a while.
Thanks, Dr. Morgan. Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Mulholland and Mr. Strope. Jennifer O'Shea, Post-Secondary Readiness Officer for the district. And next to me is Jamal Smith. He is the Director of Strategic Partnerships with IU Health. And we are absolutely thrilled to be here tonight to share with you and formally announce the IU Health partnership and the Crispus Addicts Fellowship that has been 10 months in the making. Last December, a small group of us from IU Health and IPS sat down to really talk about how do we create a talent pipeline from Crispus Addicts, which hosts our Health Sciences Academy, directly to IU Health, which sits in our backyard. IU Health is the largest employer in the state of Indiana, and we are preparing our students for jobs in healthcare, so it just made sense. And so in our first few months, we really started to look into, and Dr. Morgan, if you don't mind going to the first slide, we really started to talk about what are the actual needs that IU Health has. As you may or may not know, in our Health Sciences Academy, we have a few different pathways, and those include pre-nursing, which really leads to a CNA, a Certified Nursing Assistant certification, as well as biomedical sciences and health informatics. But what we wanted to know from IU Health is, what are your actual needs? Do any of these resonate? How do we get students really ready for jobs with IU Health? And so through those conversations, what we really learned was IU Health had a couple of different opportunities that started at really great wages that we could prepare our students for in high school. So sat down, matched up what we offer with what IU Health really needs in terms of entry-level clinical positions. And IU Health was at the table with us every other week for the last 10 months, combing through what the curriculum might be, and really stepping up to the plate to say, not only will we tell you what we need, we will help you with, making sure that these are the right courses, these are the right certifications. We will provide the hands-on experience that the students need. And not only that, but for select students who complete this curriculum and who also gain the employability and leadership skills that we need in IU Health employees, we will hire them upon graduation, and we will also help support them with tuition so that they can continue their career with IU Health. And so they have really been a great partner, one of the best employer partners that we've ever worked with, to step up and say, here's what we need, and we will hire these students upon successful completion, and here's what we need them to have when they get to us. Dr. Morgan, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So the fellowship that has been designed is going to really kick off in the fall of 2021. We will start sharing with students in October, and from there, the application will actually open in February. So between October and February, IU Health has said we will come in, we will help you host, information sessions, talk to students about the opportunity, and then they'll have the opportunity to apply come February. The application process is still being worked out, but what we want to do is look at student grades. We're not setting the bar incredibly high. We recognize that there are students in that 2.5 to 3.0 range who are really ready to show up and work hard. So we're considering any student with a 2.0 or above. We are also looking at attendance. We want those students who are going to show up and work hard every day. We're going to ask them to write a statement of interest to really indicate why they want this opportunity. And we're also going to have an interview session with the students who apply, and that will include, again, IU Health, who has said, we will walk side by side with IPS through this entire process, in addition to actually supporting those fellows once they become fellows. So the students will be notified of their admission in April. The goal is to do something really cool for those kids when we notify them. So we've thrown around some ideas around having them open something up that has a lab coat and a stethoscope, and really getting them excited and helping them understand that being a fellow is a really, really big deal. So as I mentioned, the fellowship will begin in the fall of 21 with students who are sophomores, because it is going to be a 3-year program. We'll begin with a pilot of about 25 students. The idea is to expand and grow this over the years, but we're looking for some grant funds to really support that expansion and to really help sustain it. Over the course of those 3 years, the fellows will need to not only complete the academic pieces, the curriculum that is designed once they choose which path they're going to go, but they also have to complete employability and leadership requirements. So we have partnerships with the Center for Leadership Development. We are leveraging Employee Indy's Job Ready badging. So we're making sure that we are really, we are helping to grow the entire person. Dr. Morgan? So as mentioned, the students upon graduation who successfully complete all this, Dr. Morgan, I think you need to go the other way. There we go. Thank you. So what will happen is we are growing our CNA program. We're also adding on to that medical assisting and patient care assisting. And that really comes from IU Health, who said, these are the positions that we hire for. Good starting wages, $16 to $18 an hour. And we will not only hire them, but again, we will train them up once they get to IU Health. So throughout the program, students will have a number of things that they have to accomplish. And they will earn 7 industry-recognized certifications throughout the course of the 3-year program. That'll include dementia care, CPR, the patient care assisting, and/or medical assisting, the CNA. The CNA is really sort of the first step. So once students do earn that, they can work well in high school as a CNA at a long-term health care facility, earning $12 to $13 an hour while they're still in school and getting that experience. In addition, they will have to complete more clinical externship experience in order to get that medical assisting certification. They will also have to, during the summers between sophomore year and junior year, and then again between junior and senior year, participate in internships. They will also learn, a number of different healthcare related skills, including patient care, treatment, anatomy, physiology. They will take rigorous coursework that has dual credits associated with it. So through this program, they'll earn 29 dual credits through Ivy Tech, which will directly relate to their associate degree as a healthcare specialist. And as I mentioned before, they'll participate in CLD programming, job ready badging, including other partnerships that we're continuing to cultivate to really ensure that these students are ready for employment with IU Health. So upon graduation, again, guaranteed employment. Pardon? Yes, there will be an offer for employment for a job at IU Health. Yes, as a medical assistant or patient care tech, depending on what the student participated in. In addition, corporate partners led by IU Health will provide tuition support for students to obtain that 2 and/or 4-year degree, depending on their career aspirations, which IU Health will work with them on. And they've really committed to, again, and I mentioned this earlier, providing internal pathways for their employees. We've heard a lot from their HR team over the course of the last 10 months about what they're trying to design internal to IU Health to really retain and grow their talent. And we think that's really exciting because we want that for our students. It's not just about that first job. It's about, that first good job that leads to another good job, an even better job, and a career. And I did want to mention that, this is really sort of proof of concept here. This is what we're trying to get to in IPS. This really expanded pathway is what we're going to do across the district with all of our college and career pathways. We are currently conducting a review of all of those pathways across the 4 high schools, and we'll be making recommendations on changes, really to make sure that all students have, equitable access to high-quality college and career pathways that prepare them for the rigor of higher ed and for employment opportunities in high-wage, high-demand industry sectors right here in the Indianapolis community. Wanting to make sure also that they're cultivating those foundational 21st century skills that are necessary for high school and beyond, as well as making sure that they are prepared for their which we've talked about a lot over the last few years, and just to make sure that they're set up for success when they leave us in all of their post-secondary pursuits. So I'll leave that there, but just wanted to open it up now for questions, or Jamal, if there's anything you kind of wanted to add to the presentation.
No, I think you summed it up really, really well. Jen, I just wanted to, say thank you to IPS, school board, Crispus Addicts for the opportunity. And the only thing that I would add to it is to make note that even before approaching,
Could you talk a little more directly into the mic? Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that's me or the mask. Is that better?
It's a little bit of both, probably. But.
All right. So even before we approached IPS about the opportunity, the idea of it was to, for us as an anchor institution, to kind of back in this concept, right? So one advances his or her education to make him or herself more employable, right? But we've heard from a number of other employers about the amount of time and effort that they spend continuing to train some of their newer employees about culture, about the industry, et cetera. So if there was an opportunity for us to invest in at an earlier time, young people to make sure that, one, they were adequately prepared, not just for the industry, but for the culture that the industry presents, while helping, establish a really, really cool advanced curriculum that allows, young people to exceed, then that's a win-win. And then we, as the anchor institution, largest employer in the state, would stand behind that investment and say, look, for any young person who comes through this curriculum that we've collectively, helped pull together with IPS, then we want to guarantee them an employment offer here at IU Health. Furthermore, we wanted to make sure that we weren't just positioning young people for dead-end positions and entry-level jobs, right? $16 to $18 an hour is great for an 18-year-old with limited responsibilities. For, you're 25 or 35 with a family, it doesn't really hold weight. So internally, we, as Jen mentioned, we're working to create pathways for, not just, the incoming, but current employees to advance their careers as well. So creating that pathway while ensuring the opportunities for those students to advance their careers post-secondary while removing the barriers of finance and access to us creates a great opportunity for those young people to advance both academically and professionally. And then the last thing that I'll note is that, again, as Jennifer mentioned, this pilot we hope can be duplicated. We don't think, one, it's school-specific. Our hopes is that this can be replicated in other schools, but we also don't think that it's industry-specific. We hope that we're leading an opportunity for other employers to look and find schools that they can invest in, both in the development of curriculum to make sure that young people are, even better equipped to enter the job force, but also create opportunities for them to advance post-secondary. So regardless of what that industry is, we think this is a great opportunity to expand. So again, thank you guys for the time. We appreciate the opportunity. It's a really big undertaking. We're excited about the potential here and happy to be working with IPS and Crispus Addicts on this piece. Thank you, guys.
And I did want to give a shout out. Principal Lauren Franklin from Crispus Addicts is here today. She and her team obviously have been just instrumental in designing the fellowship, and also really thinking through what the heavy lift is going to look like, right? Because this is the cool part, is thinking it through, getting excited about it. Now they're thinking about implementing it, finding the space, finding the staff, implementing the curriculum. So want to make sure I shout out her and her staff who have, really stepped up and are ready to take this on.
Thank you. For commissioners on the phone, we'll start with commissioners in the room, and then I'll go to commissioners on the phone. Commissioner Collins?
This is a very exciting opportunity for those students who would like to go into the medical field. I have a few questions. Will the students who are in this fellowship be taught at Addicts, or will they travel over to classrooms at IUPUI, or both?
So most of the curriculum will take place at Crispus Addicts. There will be, of course, the externship piece, which will happen at IU Health. Additionally, there will be some training offered at their SIM Center on the IU Health campus. So none of the college courses will actually be taught on one of the college campuses, but there will be teaching and learning happening on the IU Health campus.
Another question for you both. When a student completes a fellowship and then is working for IU Health, then do they get discounts on coursework at IU?
So one of the goals one of the primary goals of this whole fellowship or endeavor was to figure out a way to eliminate the burden of tuition for the students entering post-secondary. So not just support, but to the best, and it's going to take more than just IU Health. This is, and we should note too, there's a number of partners engaged in this piece. But our goal is to eliminate that barrier. I think if you talk to most folks, probably anyone at the college place, and they ask them what the number one barrier for entry there, it's finances. So our goal is to eliminate that barrier and create an opportunity for young people to excel both academically and professionally without having that burden on their back. So yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you. And no, that's quite enough from me. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Ms. O'Shea and Mr. Smith, appreciate the presentations for sure. This is exciting, and as a Purdue guy, I'm just going to say that I'm just incredibly excited about this partnership and what it means for students at Crispus Addicts and this partnership with IU Health. So thank you. This is probably a question that goes back in time, and being on the board for a few years, I haven't really known much about. But I know that IU has been a strategic partner of Crispus Addicts for some years. Does this new program supplant, or does it extend anything that exists? Because I guess I'm maybe more of a contextual question about sort of the general state of the relationship, because I know that partnership's been in place for a while.
As a fellow Purdue guy, I appreciate the excitement.
That's why I said it. Thank you, sir.
I know you did. I read between the lines. So one of the reasons why we chose Addicts, and again, it's a pilot. We hope that we can duplicate this thing in many areas. One, the catchment area, and I should probably make note that it's been pretty public that IU Health is in the midst of building a new hospital, and our CEO Dennis Murphy has made no qualms about our goal of figuring out how we can extend and invest in the community outside of the walls of that hospital. And in doing so, what we've been able to outline are a footprint and all of the impediments that exist in the community. And I don't have to repeat it to you guys. Of course, food scarcity, transportation, security, et cetera. Quality education is one of those pieces, as well as workforce development. And so, that was a target. And obviously, Addicts being in our backyard, we kind of joke and say, look, man, if we turn on our sprinkler system, we're bound to water their grass as well. That's how close they are. And then three, to your point, there's been remnants of relationship over the years. And so it just made sense to start with Addicts and figure out how to make this thing work. We have no interest in supplanting anything that already exists, but building on top of that. Most of those relationships have been off and on, primarily because personnel change and changes happens. And so the goal is to be able to establish a program and a curriculum and a system that outlives Jennifer and myself and whomever else is involved, so that the children now and forevermore continue to benefit from this piece. So, all the existing relationships where we have, industry professionals who are coming to the school to provide industry mentorship. We hope and plan for that to continue to exist. You made mention of, potentially having, some class at the hospital. We're trying to figure out ways to be able to bring the young people over as much as we can, legal barriers aside, right, to give them some really cool, a feel for what it looks and feels like to be in that space. And also, too, being able to open up the opportunities for professions within the healthcare industry that aren't just clinical. There's a number of opportunities within healthcare that one could engage in, and we want to make sure that we expose the young people to as many of those as possible. So, a long-winded way of answering your question and saying we want to maintain the relationships that are already there, expand on them, and solidify something that exists far beyond any of us as individuals.
Great, thank you.
I have just one quick question before I go to the phone line here, but so it's a we've got a pilot starting. It's a pilot of a 3-year fellowship. Growth outside of Crispus Addicts notwithstanding, do you anticipate if the pilot continues to go well that it would be every year you would start a new 3-year cohort?
Yeah. So, and I'm gonna let Jen. So I'm saying, so we have this back and forth. I think it starts this year. It starts with the communication of introducing this thing to the freshmen. So we are literally getting started where we want to say, hey, to students and parents, here's an opportunity for you to take advantage of. This is, above and beyond, the normal expectation, which is, what we're asking these kids to do. It's not everybody's cup of tea. We'll get it because we're going to ask these young people who engage in this fellowship to do more. It won't be an option. We want you to engage in the after-school, personal and professional development. We want you and require you to engage in the internships that expose you to the variety of different industry options within healthcare. The externship and your experience coming over to, the hospital and gaining that experience is vitally important. Like those things will be a piece of it. This is something, that introduction, then the application, and then they, meat and potato start sophomore year. We reset next year with a freshman, and then that cycle just continues.
Yeah, I think Jamal answered it there at the end well with just, this is every year. It's not just this one group of 25 kids, and they're going to be fellows, and in 3 years they'll get a job. Next year we'll start all over again with next year's freshmen in terms of getting them the information, having them apply. I think the goal is really, though, that we don't have to limit it to 25 students a year or 25 fellows a year. I think the goal is that we can get to a point where the next year it's 40 and then 60. So yeah, this is not a one and done.
Thank you. What I'll do is go alphabetically for commissioners on the phone, just so we're not bumping into each other. Commissioner Arnold, do you have any questions?
No question, just comment. Sounds like a phenomenal program. I really appreciate all the planning and all the details and the specificity. And I think it's just one more example of how great partnerships between our district and great community partners benefit our students. So thank you very much to all of those that were involved.
Commissioner Gore, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I, again, just kind of want to tag on to what Commissioner Arnold said. I appreciate the fact that IU is giving our students this opportunity. And I'm very pleased when I see that they'll provide tuition assistance, so the students can earn a 2 or 4 year degree. So it's not just stopping at high school. So because that's my alma mater, I really appreciate what they're doing. And thank you. I know our students will benefit.
Commissioner Moore, do you have any questions?
I do not, and as always, I do not like to repeat myself, but what I do want to say is that I am very thankful for IU Health continuing to do this program, especially since they are now expanding their hospital within our district, which is a footprint for us. I also wanted to give them a shout out because I believe this is what it's really about when we talk about Black Lives Mattering, that it matters about a Black Life Mattering because it gives our children an opportunity to have a career that will provide them with substance and money and financial support and knowledge as they move through the system. So with all that, I want to say thank you to IU Health, and I want to give a shout out to Crispus Addicts and the medical magnet for continuing to do great work with our students in IPS.
Commissioner Slack?
I will not repeat what every other commissioner has said. I appreciate IU Health for their opportunity for our students, and thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Great work.
Thank you, guys.
And I was glad you guys were able to share the Purdue love here. I was just,
Thank you, Mr. Smith and Ms. O'Shea. So move on to unfinished business, item 7.01, the approval of journal obligation bonds for tech and equipment. So I'll turn it over to Weston Young, our Chief Financial Officer.
And Weston, before you get started, I'll remind commissioners, we've actually had this presentation once or twice, once?
One time.
We had a hearing at
Last
our
month.
last meeting. And so I think if we can kind of I really do want to spend some time on the reopening plans. If we can be kind of at that top-down level or top level, and then if we have questions, we can come to some specific things.
Yep, 3 slides.
Perfect. Oh, it's like you knew it was coming.
I thought of you when I was putting this together. So, can you slide? Yeah. First thing I wanted to review is the process, just to outline where we are. So as Commissioner O'Connor was noting, in August, we had a public hearing. We adopted a project resolution defining the project, adoption of the preliminary bond resolution. Tonight, we are adopting a resolution to issue the GO bonds. So the resolution is available. Eric Long from Ice Miller is here, our bond counsel, to answer any questions you'd have. So tonight, we're going to be approving and seeking approval for the bond resolution. We'll continue on in October, hold a hearing for the additional appropriation, basically the ability to pay for that additional interest and debt payments, then also sell the bonds in October. Again, get those proceeds in November and make the first payment in January. Next slide, please. So again, the why, we're seeking additional capital to purchase technology related to our shift to one-to-one for all of our students. And again, since March of 2020, when we've shifted to that one-to-one device for students, we've spent almost $18 million on devices, 12,000 iPads, 20,000 Chromebooks, and over 8,000 MiFis. The GEO bonds that we will issue is totaled at $5.35 million. Not the full amount of that $18 million, but about a third of that. That's the presentation.
Any questions for Mr. Young? As I said, we've had a pretty detailed presentation in August, but I want to make sure everybody, Commissioner Hawkins, you have a question?
I'll ask my one brief question. Weston, I know that we will issue the bonds, but maybe more of a technical question. I know this is a very secure investment because it's backed by property tax proceeds, I'll say.
Correct.
Who would be the buyer in general, or buyers of GEO bonds issued by IPS?
Yeah, typically it would be an institutional bank that would buy the bonds. So a Merrill Lynch, a Bank of America, large bank institutional investors.
I'll go in reverse order. Commissioner Collins, you don't have any questions, do you? I'll go in reverse order for our commissioners on the phone. Commissioner Slack, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thanks.
Commissioner Moore?
Do not, thank you.
Commissioner Gore?
No, I do not.
Great, and Commissioner Arnold?
Nope, I'm fine.
Perfect. All right, we have the presentation in front of us. Do I have a motion to approve the final bond resolution as presented?
So move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion among commissioners with regards to the issuance of the GO bonds? Hang on, sorry. Oh, yeah, and Mr. Mulholland will do a roll call vote. But any further discussion? And then, so Mr. Mulholland, why don't you do the roll call?
Commissioner Arnold,
Yes?
Commissioner Gore,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore,
Yes.
Commissioner Slack,
Yes.
Secretary Collins,
Yes.
Vice President Hawkins,
Yes.
President O'Connor.
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 7-0.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Weston. So for our next item in new business, item 8.01, we will focus on an update on the school reopening. And so I know we have been in front of this board multiple times, really since March and April, talking about the start of school, which we are in now, and then as we continue to think about the phased approach to reentry, want to make sure we provide some updates. Just want to note off the top, as with most of these presentations, there's quite a bit of information, and so you will see some slides that you've seen before that we went through last Tuesday, and then of course we will want to go deeper into some items, in particular some items where we have noticed trending questions from staff and from families, and so we'll want to make sure we hit those as well. So I will get us started and then turn it over to a few of my colleagues. So what we'll focus on here is we'll provide an update on the phased approach to reentry. So we will hone in on the model and the metrics, which we have seen before. We'll talk about the timeline, and then, as I mentioned, we have some key questions and then answers that we want to make sure that we are highlighting this evening, as we've been receiving some really great questions from our stakeholders. So to start things off, in August, this board approved our IPS 2025 strategic plan, most notably the values. So you see on this slide, there are 5 values that will guide our organization into the future: students first, racial equity, continuous improvement, integrity, and community. And so these are really important anchoring core beliefs for us as we continue to work through many challenges related to the reopening. And so I want to make sure that we start these presentations by acknowledging our values as an organization. So this slide is our vision for school year start in light of COVID-19. This you have seen this multiple times. It is what we have presented, I think, again, since April or May. So number one, IPS needs to maximize in-person time for the purpose of prioritizing high-quality instruction for our students. And so obviously, we will hone in on that specific vision tonight, while prioritizing the safety of our students and staff and operating in alignment with city planning and expectations for reopening the economy. So again, you will see all aspects of this vision at play with our phase-in plan. And so our 3 buckets of non-negotiables that you have seen before. Our first bucket is safety non-negotiables. So when IPS returns to school, the following non-negotiables will need to be in place: social distancing prioritized, and then of course COVID-specific safety protocols will be in place at all schools, and those have been in place since July, and our schools are working hard at ensuring that they will implement those should we go back in person in a few weeks. Academic non-negotiables. And so, again, I've mentioned this before, but we're honing in on the first 2 there, where we have already been executing a full-time e-learning model, and much gratitude to our teachers and our principals and our staff for executing that. So we've been doing that for about a month, and then something you will see continue to play out in the model is a full-time e-learning option must be available to all students who would like to opt out of the in-person option. And then the non-negotiable bucket number 3, financial non-negotiables. And again, we've mentioned this many times, but we must balance the increased COVID-related expenses while anticipating the possibility of declining revenue. Our last presentation on Tuesday, we went into a little bit more depth in terms of what our COVID expenditures are currently looking like. And so we will continue to track those as well. So we'll dive into some general information around the phased approach and start with some current context. So do want to acknowledge this past Tuesday, the 22nd, we did experience an internet outage. And so the IPS internet experienced an outage that impacted users across the district. Our internet provider identified that outage was caused by damage to 2 fiber optic cables that run underground from their location to our location right here at the Ed Center. And so our vendor got on that pretty quickly, and they sent a team out and worked throughout the afternoon to fix those fiber optic cables, and that was resolved about 6 p.m. on Tuesday. And so the impact, users across the organization experienced difficulty with accessing IPS managed platforms and programs. So due to the disruption, we communicated that there would be no virtual learning taking place on Tuesday, this past Tuesday. Our teachers did continue to work to create asynchronous lesson plans for students, and our team is currently determining how students will make up for that lost instructional day. Again, that'll be asynchronously, since teachers did work to create those plans, and so we thank them for that. And then, of course, we appreciate the flexibility displayed by our staff, students, and families as we experience that outage. And so I want to make an important note around next steps. Our team is working through plans to ensure that teaching and learning would not be interrupted should we experience a similar challenge as we move forward. From what I understand, we did have a redundancy. There was that second fiber optic line that was the redundancy that was also damaged. And so we are working with our vendor. They're doing an after-action review, which is something they do typically when something like this happens. And so in terms of the exact cause of the damage, we should know more soon. But just wanted to make sure right off the top that we acknowledged this past Tuesday. And again, really appreciate everyone's flexibility. And so as we move on, we have looked at this slide a few times, but just kind of acknowledging where we've been. Of course, late June, we articulated that along with the rest of Marion County, that we would like to go back in person. And then, of course, as we saw the positivity rate and the new cases trend upward over the summer, on July 18th, this board made the decision to continue to try to operate in person, but push that start date back to see how the data continue to play out. And then on July 30th, made the decision to start full virtual, which again is what we've been executing. And so our attendance rate continues to increase and trend upward, which is a great sign. So we appreciate all of the work that our schools are doing to ensure that they are engaging and communicating with our students and families. And so that's where we currently are from an attendance perspective. And then from a model perspective, again, we brought this out last week, effective 9/15. And so we'll stop here and go over this in detail. But you can see the levels on the top that are color-coded. That is in alignment with Marion County Department of Public Health. And so they have a school dashboard and a school model that we have aligned ourselves to. And then our grade configuration on the far left-hand column, pre-K 6, middle school 7 and 8, and high school. And so you see the positivity rate across the top where the color code row is. And so currently we are working to execute a plan where we would be in that yellow column. So pre-K to 6 would be 100% in person. Of course, that full-time remote opt-in option would be available. From a middle school perspective and high school perspective, that would be hybrid with a full-time remote opt-in option available as well for both middle school and high school. And so just want to make sure we continue to show this slide and clarify that we are moving forward with the yellow level. As you see, greater than 5%, less than 11% positivity rate. Again, this is in alignment with Marion County's model. And so we've received some really good questions recently, about how we have, or why we transitioned to this model. For example, what is the, why we are utilizing positivity rate as the determining factor for this. So what is the preliminary or primary metric being used for determination? And as you can see underlined there, Marion County positivity rate, all tests. That is in direct alignment with both Marion County and the Indiana Department of Health. And so the source that we are utilizing, and I am going to this dashboard on a daily basis, is the Indiana Department of Health dashboard. And you can just Google that and it'll come right up, and you just hover over Marion County and you can see the 7-day moving average for the positivity rate. And there is a 6-day lag that the dashboard does explain in terms of that data. And so second question, how will the phase-in approach align with Marion County Public Health Department guidance? So again, as I've mentioned a few times, we are consistent with the metric usage and levels of determination there. And then just as a quick note, we will continue to collaborate with Marion County Public Health Department to monitor the data and make decisions regarding the potential shift in level. Additionally, we will monitor the following information. And so you just saw the average daily student attendance, which is something we monitor normally. But of course, the other metrics here are really important to us as we continue to make decisions. So even though positivity rate is that primary metric, I want to make sure that we are also tracking the 7-day trend in COVID cases, for example, and then of course the availability and capability of testing and contact tracing and the turnaround time for COVID testing results. And so we will continue to monitor that as well. And so again, just kind of taking a step back, again, the rationale for moving to this model is consistent with Marion County Public Health Department and Indiana Department of Health guidance. It aligns with local school districts and school corporations who are also operating in alignment with Marion County. Responsive to current research pertaining to the age and transmission. So a lot of the studies that we have seen come out have articulated or shown that that age matters when it comes to transmission of COVID. And so you will see that our younger students in particular are prioritized in terms of getting back into in-person should families desire to do so. And then responsive to our vision that has guided our planning process. So going back to the vision around maximizing in-person learning for high-quality instruction and the safety of our students and staff, as well as alignment with our city. All of those are at play here in terms of our updated phase-in approach. And so from a timeline perspective, I've added a little bit to this slide here. And so I do want to note off the top that this is, of course, subject to change. We will continue to monitor data. And I know it's not on this slide, but I believe that Governor Holcomb has moved the state of Indiana to level 5, I think starting on Saturday, if I read that correctly. And then Dr. Kane and Mayor Hogsett will have a press conference tomorrow where they will walk through the impact on Marion County. And so, again, I think that just, speaks to, information continuing to change. We'll continue to be flexible. But again, we've seen, and I think from the state and Marion County perspective, some positive trends from a positivity rate of COVID-19. So working backwards from the 19th of October, that is when we will do full execution of the yellow level. So the grid that we showed a few slides ago, that is when we would be fully executing. Moving back to the week of the 12th, that would be full virtual for all students. We've mentioned that a few times. That was the prior fall break, and so we had articulated months ago that we would stay full virtual to allow for students, families, staff members, et cetera, that had made other plans. But learning will still happen on the week of the 12th. It'll just still be full virtual. And then the week of the 5th, we will do pre-K3 in person, and then 4 through 12 will remain full virtual. And then on the 28th, so this is this coming Monday, and I'll mention this a few different times this evening, we do have a Parent Institute that is planned. That is this coming Monday evening at 6 p.m., I believe. And we will go into quite a bit of detail there with our academic model, transportation safety guidelines. So again, we've been receiving great questions and want to make sure that we are opening that up to provide additional information to our parents as well as answer some Q&A. So that will take place on the 28th. Continuing to work backwards, we did have an all-staff IPS meeting this past week and was able to walk through a lot of the information you're seeing this evening. And then we had a board work session last Tuesday where we initially started walking through this information. So I will come back up to that week of October 5th. And as you see at the bottom of the slide there, the rationale for starting with pre-K3 students the week of the 5th. And so I want to make sure we're clear on the rationale for this. And I've received a lot of great questions on this front. So we are starting the week of the 5th for, again, pre-K through 3 in person for a number of reasons, but that is aligned to our vision of maximizing instruction through in-person instruction, as well as our student-first organizational value that we showed right off the top of the deck here. Knowing that colder months are coming, I think it's important to maximize in-person learning while the COVID positivity rate is continuing to trend downward. So essentially taking advantage of the fact that we have seen that trend downward. And who knows what's going to happen in the future, but there is a belief that as colder months arrive, you could see that positivity rate start to spike up again. And so I want to make sure we take advantage of the positivity rate being low while we can. And then also this allows for time for our teachers, our staff, our schools to execute new protocol supporting student, staff, and safety. So obviously a lot of things have changed between now and last March, which is the last time we were in buildings. And so that will provide an opportunity for our schools to execute those protocols with less students in the building to kind of slow roll that in. And so that wanted to be very clear with the rationale for why we were starting the week of the 5th for a select group of our students. And so what happens on October 19th? Again, I realize this is a lot of information, so I want to make sure we hit a few of these things multiple times for clarity. So on October 19th, we will be pushing to the yellow level. That is a pre-K to 6 return in person every day, and then of course do have the option to opt into e-learning. Many of our families have already done so. And then our 7th through 12th grade students will operate in a hybrid model, and they'll rotate by the last name, the alphabet by their last name. And so this information has been out on the website. We went through it last week, but that hybrid model, Monday and Tuesday, you see the last names there. A through K will attend in person. And then Wednesday will be a remote learning day for all students. Again, that is for grades 7 through 12, and then some 6th grade students. And then Thursday and Friday, students with the last names L through Z will attend in person, while the last names A through K will follow a schedule and watch classes remotely. So again, that is the hybrid model at grades 7 through 12, which we'll be executing on October 19th. So did want to make an important note, and this, obviously goes to what talked about earlier in terms of the governor, making some, or pushing us to a level 5 on Saturday, and then Dr. Kane and Mayor Hogsett sharing some information tomorrow. But we are currently reviewing the e-learning and transportation family survey data. So again, those are families who are choosing to continue e-learning, and or families who are willing to opt out of IPS transportation. That survey has been open for about a week now, maybe a little bit more. It's open through next Tuesday, so we've extended that just to continue to give families time and information so they can make an informed decision. So the data will have an impact on our ability to optimize social distancing across our buildings and buses. So again, as we are pulling that data in, we are looking very closely at that on a per building basis to ensure that we can optimize the social distancing. And then we will have more information next week to determine if there's an impact on the 19th. But do want to note, as we've said from the start, and I think Superintendent Johnson has reiterated a number of times that, we'll continue to monitor the data. This is really important data for us as an organization in terms of managing the number of students in buildings, as well as on our buses. And so we've already started to dive into that, and then we'll do so in more detail early next week to see if there is any impact on the 19th. But as of now, we're moving forward with the yellow level on the 19th. So now we'll switch over for a few academic updates. I'll turn it over to Dr. Morgan to provide those.
Thank you, Andrew. So one of the things we wanted to update you guys on was just how we are planning to assess our students' progress. So I know we've been getting questions. We've been in school for about a month to think about where are our students. We've been giving that attendance data. I know we've been doing some of our grades analysis, but I do want to let you know when we're going to be doing some of our formal assessments. So in a typical school year, we would probably be doing our NWEA assessments right now. When we were planning to launch our NWEA assessments virtually, we consulted other districts in the Council of the Great City Schools and just really figuring out what other systems were doing. And it was advised that we would not move forward with doing all of the formative assessments or formal assessments virtually, just because we found in research it takes twice the amount of time, the tech that it would require, and then we also didn't want, if students and families were frustrated with the tech issues, that it not be a true measure of where students are. So with that said, we're reviewing other practices from other districts and moved our assessment window for NWEA. So you can see we'll be doing our middle of year NWEA assessment starting November 9th. It's a little earlier than when we normally do our NWEA assessment. And this also gives us students will be in school for about a month before we give those assessments out. Next slide. Also with our DIVL screener, this is typically a dyslexia screener assessment that we do once a year. This year we're doing it twice a year for that same reason. This assessment actually can be administered by the teacher virtually on a one-on-one. It is a one-to-one assessment. So some of our teachers have actually, will start doing those assessments as soon as this upcoming week. And I'll go through October. But our formal dyslexia screener will take place in February through March. So we have a little bit of time, but that's for us to really figure out where our primary grade students are so that it also informs instruction as well.
Great, thanks, Dr. Morgan. So now we will move on to some key questions and answers. So as I mentioned off the top, we've been receiving a number of great questions from our staff, from our families, and want to make sure that as we have this platform, we have looked at a lot of those questions, have looked at the trends, some of the really big ones that keep coming through. Want to make sure we're providing answers to those questions. And so I will turn it back over to Dr. Morgan, and then also Dr. Henderson, our Chief Schools Officer, will walk through a few of these.
So one of the things when we met last, we shared some sample schedules. We talked a little bit about how this would look like, but we wanted to provide this brief slide. And we went into a little bit more in depth with the guidance we gave to principals about what a day in the life would look like for a student. So on this slide, and I'll just narrate it and not read it verbatim, it shows one column that discusses what the day in the life will look like for a virtual pre-K through 5th grade or elementary student versus what the day in the life will look like for a virtual middle school student, as well as for those in person. And so the headline message here for our elementary students that will be attending virtually, they will follow along with their classes with the students that are in person. There will be direct instruction happening with the teacher. But there will also be, I know there have been questions, would students just be staring at a screen for 5-6 hours and looking at direct instruction? The way we've modeled this, and on the next slide you'll see in a moment about how it looks like for teachers, the way the block will look like is that there will only be about 20 to 30 minutes where the student is involved in direct instruction for a given content area, and then there'll be small group learning where a student may be rotating in a different station. They may be watching a video. They may be working on work independently. So it really enables us to maximize that blended learning feel. And that'll be the same for our middle and high school students. The block will look very similar where it's broken up with the direct instruction versus those that are more asynchronous. For those students that are attending in person, they will follow their regular schedule. The nice thing about this mix of students, it will both be virtual and in person. It enables students to interact even on their computer with some of the students that may be virtually, and actually just maximizing kind of 21st century learning that we see outside of a pandemic. Next slide. So this slide here talks a little bit about what a sample of a day in the life of a teacher could look like while teaching a block. So I know there were questions about could a teacher manage this if they're concurrently teaching both students that are in person and virtual. So the last time we talked about some of the technology needs that a teacher could use. This can happen with as simple of technology as just a laptop, or it can also be used if teachers have in their classroom projector screens or whiteboards. Some of our schools have smart boards. So in those classrooms, teachers would be welcoming the students that are in person, taking attendance at the top of the block, while at the same time opening up their virtual classroom to those students that are remote and taking their virtual attendance as well. During this time, students will be completing what we call a bell ringer or a do now activity. Then the next part of the block, the teacher will actually facilitate direct instruction. That's when they will actually be talking to the students that are in person, but then the students that are virtual will be able to see them virtually, and then also they could share their screen where the students that are virtually can look at the exact same thing that students are looking at in classroom. That longer part of a block is where a teacher can really break out into small groups. When we gave this guidance to our school leaders, we showed how there can be different stations that a student could rotate to, where the students that are in person as well as those students that are virtual can just rotate from activity to activity, and the teacher can just facilitate that. This would look like what a normal classroom would look like if teachers were breaking down small groups to all the students that are in person. So that's how that larger block looks like. And then the teacher will conclude the class with doing some form of an exit ticket that can be administered virtually to those students that are virtual, and then also in person to those students that are in person. Next slide. Yeah.
Okay. We fielded some questions that there were possibly concerns from parents or staff around what would the quality of the remote experience look like for those families who selected full-time remote. And so we have, since we came back to school in July, provided some professional development, and we've continued that. We've added additional modules as we've heard feedback from teachers or principals. As Dr. Morgan and I have observed classrooms as well as the principals in the EDSs, we've continued to refine that. We also expect that teachers would continue in some of those evidence-based remote practices that we shared at the onset of returning to school. We also provided some examples of how the practices they were familiar with, like gradual release, could transfer into the online environment. And so we fully expect that continued professional development, as well as those expectations for evidence-based instructional practices, would continue. But we've also made sure that the students who select the full remote option will have access to the same curriculum. There is a caveat for some of the CTE courses and some of the requirements that can't be provided online. And then we have made the decision that the schools could serve those students who opt for fully remote in terms of their own classroom teachers. And so in some cases, it might be the same teacher that a student has started school with, and in some cases, depending upon the fully remote numbers that a school may have, they may assign another teacher from that grade level or that department, but it'd still be somebody who is tied to that school community, that relationships were already cemented from this school year.
All right, here was the slide I was thinking I was going to see. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about was how are we going to support our most vulnerable students. And so for our most vulnerable students, we assembled our team that looks and supports our special needs students as well as our McKinney-Vento students and our newcomers. And they wanted to make sure with all the case conferences we've been talking about that we were actually going to be able to deliver the instructional quality that we want for our students that are most vulnerable. And so we have decided that for our middle and high school students, instead of doing the hybrid schedule by last name, if you're in one of these categories, special needs, McKinney-Vento, or newcomers, you will attend Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, with Wednesday being remote, just like all the other students. And so this way, you will actually have direct instruction in person 4 out of the 5 days of the week. There is an option for those families that want full-time remote that they can have that, but we do recommend this model for our McKinney-Vento special needs students as well as newcomer students. And then for students in our alternative education programs, they will actually attend in person every day of the week, as well as a full-time remote option being available. The final thing I'll say with this is we're starting to get those numbers in from the parent opt-in survey. And based on our numbers and with the amount of students that we have in one of these categories, if we need to revisit not only just this policy, but revisit how many students are actually in the building, just because we're not able to socially distance, that's one of the things that we'll be looking at in the next week, and we'll revise those plans as well. This next slide here really is just a reiteration of what Andrew shared earlier about why we're choosing the week of October 5th. So I won't go over that piece there. We just really wanted to make sure that we eased into this, and also for our younger students, that they're really practicing those routines, and that we're not going full-fledged at the same time, that we're really just practicing those things so that when we go on October 19th, we'll be ready. There's also been a question about why October 12th is virtual. If we're going back with some students October 5th, why are we going with October 12th being a virtual week? As you know, when we pushed our school year back, one of the things that we had to do was make the fall break week, which was this week of October 12th, an instructional week. And so we want to honor those plans that families may have had and make sure that if families or students have alternative plans or they're going to be traveling, that they can still participate in the instructional process because it'll be virtual while still doing their plans that their family has in place.
Another set of questions that that were lifted frequently were about our safety protocols. And so we are requiring that all students wear masks. There will be some grade level specific guidance around when a mask break is appropriate and for how long of that mask break. Also questions around nurses in schools. And so all schools will have a nurse assigned, at least part-time. As of right now, 90% of our buildings, we have secured a nurse, and we expect to be fully staffed in the coming weeks. And then each school has a COVID response team, and this was put in place back in July as we were preparing for school. And so the COVID response team has a couple of different responsibilities. They manage the safety protocols in their school. They also do a lot of the communication management. They help to remind the staff within the building. And then also the action response to if there is a positive COVID case or exposure. And so that they will continue to work and function as we return back to face-to-face. What are we doing to support our teachers in the concurrent model for instructional delivery? We've shared at our last board meeting, and I referenced a little bit ago, we have been providing training on the blended learning. And so if you think about station rotation, flipped learning, we're curating those playlists. We're using our academics team members. We're also leveraging our partnerships with Microsoft Teams, with Apple, so that we can make sure that teachers have access to that PD. We have also ask schools to identify within their buildings teachers, as Principal Faulkner lifted up, who had taken advantage of quarantine and possibly learned new skills around managing the digital platforms, identifying who within their buildings could be the best to leverage those resources in the building for tech tools and how to use those. And so that is something that principals have been asked to do and are expected. And also in terms of our technology, 17 million in counting we have put into our technology infrastructure for the one-to-one at the K through 12 level. We also conducted a technology survey for our principals in terms of what technology tools, hardware are within their buildings. Is there anything that needs to be repaired? Do they have items that they need assistance in getting? We also ask them again to that teacher or teachers who could provide some within building support for their colleagues. And principals are responsible for making sure that within their building, the technology tools that they have, that is disseminated across classroom teachers and staff who will need to use that to teach, whether they are rotating in the middle and high school for the hybrid, or whether or not they are providing the instruction concurrently for their students who opt in for the full remote, or the students who are in person.
All right, thank you, Dr. Morgan, Dr. Henderson. And so again, thanks again to all our families and staff who have been pushing out tremendous questions. And so hopefully those got some answers to some of the questions you've had. Keep sending those our way as they really do help in our planning. And so just one quick additional slide here from a next step perspective. So I mentioned this off the top, but for families, filling out the surveys for full-time remote opt-in and transportation opt-out that began on the 15th of September, and we have pushed that back to next Tuesday. That way we could have this conversation this evening and continue to share information. Then, of course, as I've mentioned, we've got the Parent Institute on next Monday evening. So for parents that are still wanting more information to make an informed decision, you have until next Tuesday to do that. And then from an IPS perspective, we've talked about this a little bit, but we are working on a dashboard for positive cases that we will put online. And so that is in development. And then our principals and school teams are working very hard right now with student schedules, as that is very complex. And so we thank them for their work there. Dr. Henderson mentioned teacher PD and support, and then of course transportation readiness, and then clear and consistent communication. So continue to check the IPS website for additional information. Our Office of Communication and Engagement is doing a great job of continuing to put clear information there. As I mentioned, tune in to our next Parent Institute on Monday, this coming Monday, the 28th at 6 p.m. And then in addition, there are a number of slides in this appendix, and we will make sure that this deck gets up on the website as well. And that goes into a little bit more information around safety protocol, transportation, et cetera. Those slides are consistent with what we shared last Tuesday evening, but there are about 60 slides here, so we decided we'd stop here at 31. And so that is in the appendix as well. for those of you that want to look through those. So now we will open it up for any questions.
First, Andrew, thank you. Thank you. I actually was looking back through some of the emails I got. The addition of the context to the questions that we're all getting, I think, has been very helpful. And then just to reiterate, the September 28th meeting is actually the rescheduled meeting from this past Tuesday because of the technology fail that we had. What I'm going to do is start with our commissioners on the phone for questions. So Commissioner Collins, I'll come back to you. I won't forget you, I promise. I'm going to go to see if Commissioner Arnold has any questions relative to the deck that we just walked through. Commissioner Arnold?
I do. I'd first like to thank the staff, the team. I mean, it's apparent how much work has gone into this. It's just remarkable. For people to say that nothing has been done is absolutely false. There's so much work that's gone into this and so many layers and so many different components. So thank you very much. The only question I have is, and maybe I missed it, can you address people moving from virtual to in-class? I know in the beginning, the first plan, if they started in class, they could go to virtual, but if they started virtual, they had to stay virtual for a period of time. Does that hold with this plan? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so once the families that are opting into the full-time remote option must stay in that option through the semester, which concludes in January.
I went to 2 phones.
Commissioner Arnold, were you able to hear that?
No.
The answer was that the families that choose the remote option must stay in that option until the end of the semester, which is December, end of
December or early January.
Yeah, December, early January. So it's consistent with the last time presentation on that.
So if they start out in person, then they can switch whenever they want to virtual. But once they're in virtual, they stay till the end of the semester. Is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay. Thank you.
based on the nodding of heads that I'm looking at here. Any other questions, Commissioner Arnold?
No, that's it. Just thank you for all of the work. It's just phenomenal to me how all the different elements, that it takes to put this plan together. So I think it's going to be the best that we can do in this very uncertain time for our students.
Commissioner Gore, do you have any questions?
I just want to thank the leadership for all of their hard work. I know that this is not easy when I even think, and I want to thank our teachers who are going to be doing the hybrid, teaching both in school and our virtual learners. I appreciate the work that our leadership is doing to ensure that our special needs and our mental children are going to be able to get education on a consistent basis. I think a lot of the questions that parents have asked, most of them have been answered tonight. I'm just wanting to continue to make sure that our evaluating of these programs are going to be so that we can see our children progress as we go along. So, again, thank you so much for your hard work.
Commissioner Moore? He's been having connection problems. Commissioner Slack, do you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Commissioner
Okay, I'm sorry, I must have had my phone when I thought it was on mute, must have been on, not on mute. But I just also want to ditto what everyone else just said, but I also want to thank the administration for looking at the questions that many people have been asking and trying to ensure that they answer those questions, especially the question around special education and the additional services that will be provided on a daily basis. So I'm very happy to see that. I guess the only question I have is the same question I had before, and I recognize that we don't know this yet. What happens if more children want to do in-service school versus virtual, and then we can't reach the capacity of a particular building. So I know that we don't have the answer to, we don't know whether or not that's going to happen or not, but have we been thinking about that? And if so, do we have any idea around what those plans are going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm moving back here to slide 18, which kind of articulates, I think, Commissioner Moore, and yeah, I know you've asked this question, a few times, and that's why we need that data, number one, from a family survey perspective, and so we've been getting that in. And as a team, we've got a process outlined where we are analyzing that data, and if there are schools that rise to the top in terms of, it's looking like it's going to be challenging to optimize social distancing, then we've got, some things that we could potentially put in place to try to mitigate that. I know some of that has already happened. We did some of that this past July when we were moving to a potential reopening. And so Scott Martin and his team worked tirelessly to remove a lot of furniture out of buildings and actually bought new desks where there were classrooms with tables in them, et cetera, and that helped mitigate a lot of the challenge. But I think the question is spot on, that we'll see where we are early next week in terms of what that data looks like and ensure that we've got clear plans moving forward.
Thanks, Scott. So
We lose you again, Commissioner Moore?
can you hear me? Okay, but the final question is that any family that wants their child to attend in person, they will be attending in person. Is that correct? We will be making some type of accommodations to ensure that we are able to meet all those major goals that are no-go, that are definitely no-goes for us. And the child still can attend in person as the parent wants. Is that correct?
That is the direction we are currently moving, yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And Commissioner Moore, to your point on that, it will, sorry, I'm talking to two different things. To your point, I think, clearly what we heard in this presentation is those are some of the things that we'll have to give them the flexibility to address once the data comes in, and there may be modifications to what we were presented tonight in order to meet those families' needs. So, but appreciate the question. Commissioner Slack, do you have a question?
Yes, to Commissioner Moore's point, that was my question too, was beating the goal of the number of students that do want to be in person. If a child wants to be in person, or if they want to be virtual, and they're moving around other kids in order for everyone to be able to get the teacher, will the teachers have to change for students, or will they stay the same, or is that still going to be left up to the principals? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I want to make sure I heard the question correctly. Commissioner Slack, you asked that if the numbers of the virtual opt-in or the in-person fluctuate, could a student's teacher change?
Yes, that's exactly my question.
And that could happen at a school. It might not happen for every grade level, but it could happen within a grade level at a school. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if my child was, just say, was K through 6, and my child was in a school for just elementary, that could change their teacher. So if a number of kids want to go in person and it fluctuates, that could change our kids' teachers. Okay, that was my only concern, because if kids developing relationships with teachers and they know the structure of the student, and then now that changes for a student. That was my question as well. So thank you for answering that.
Thank you. Commissioner Collins?
Thank you, and I know this is very complex work. I'm wondering if students who come back to school will bring their computers, and they'll be working in the classrooms on their computers.
Yes, we are giving students that option. So schools will be making that determination. We're recommending that students bring it just because what we described here, it enables the teachers to do more with the learning and maximize it. But every school will be making that decision for themselves. There were some concerns brought up about, lost devices or students bringing it back and forth. And so I know school leaders will be making that decision, but we do highly recommend that.
Because I'm also concerned about lost devices and the cost of all of this. Has this, any of this plan been put into other languages? Spanish, or if it's going to be made public, have we reached out to our non-English speaking populations?
So I know with all of our like decks that we do or anything that formal we do, parent presentations, external facing documents, yes, it is. For our internal document, which is pretty lengthy for all of our staff and principals, no, but I will make sure that we have that. I do believe, though, for all of our, I don't know if we have any staff members that is their primary, yeah.
Well, I would think that there would be English spoken. I was wondering if it's something that's public, and I've had some letters from parents about that, that the information is not conveyed in a language that they speak or are more familiar with. So I hope we address that. And on slide 24, when you said a sample of what a teaching block can look like in practice, I'm assuming that you meant when you said students engage in in-person station, that a small group, and if you're social distancing, then small groups are really not an appropriate segue into maybe independent learning. So am I correct in that, or is that something that you actually do promote, is everybody doing stations?
Just so I make sure, clarifying that, so when you're saying in a small group, even if the students are doing social distancing?
On slide 24, it says students engage in in-person station learning. And stations, I'm familiar with stations, and they're usually small groups and people working together in a very close proximity to one another. And so this means, I'm wondering if that's just a random sample that you've used, but not really a specific idea that people are actually going to put little kids in stations.
Great question. So in the guidance that we gave to principals, we did discuss the stations, but we described what a station could look like. So in one station, it could be a station with laptops at a table where students are actually engaging in questions on a note catcher. So it doesn't have to be that they're like what we're probably familiar with in terms of stations where they're building something together or working really small. It's just a segment of the class where they're working on one activity. Another may be where a teacher is reading to a group of students, some that are in person, also some that are virtually. So it is still smaller groups, but they can appropriately social distance. And we also gave guidance about what students and teachers are supposed to be doing in those classrooms. So it would not be anything that would violate that, where students would be actually working or touching or those types of things in a small station.
So is that a mandate for teachers to that kind of group pull out, or can there be an independent work from the point where they're socially distancing?
Yeah, it's not a mandate. We just gave teachers options. There was also several articles that we provided to teachers where they can see what this looks like in person. A couple of pictures in the guidance that we gave so they can see it, to see what other districts are doing. But it's not a mandate that they absolutely have to do stations. It can also be like the playlist. I know Dr. Henderson was mentioning that, where students walk in, they each individually have their own assignment, and they go through their playlist as they go throughout the day. So there's many different ways of how this can look like.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Collins, I can answer your question.
Yes?
Christian, back here. I can answer your question regarding the full PowerPoint being put on the website. Everything that we do is translated into Spanish. When we put it on the website, then Google Translate will translate into any other language based off of whatever the family needs. So that's why we put everything on the website, and we are putting the full PowerPoint, the whole thing, not just what was shown here today, on the website in 2 different places. And so if there's a family that needs an additional language, they can use Google Translate to see it in the language they speak.
So anything, you're saying that anything that we publish publicly, individuals, families can change, can translate that? And
That's
it's-
correct,
it's
on Google Translate.
visible for them to see that?
That's correct.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's good.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, President O'Connor. Andrew, I appreciate the update on the connectivity or the disruption from the other day, because I just want to lift that up again to know that, moving from 3 to 1 to 1 to 1 in the world that we're in, I mean, that type of disruption is monumental, right, to the delivery of 1 to 1 in this world that we're in. And so I appreciate the update on that. I appreciate the fact that the vendor is procuring an after-action report, and I have to assume that they know that this is of the highest stakes and of the utmost importance. And so I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that, all of this that we're talking about is great, but if we can't deliver it because of an infrastructure failure, then that's cataclysmic. So I appreciate you acknowledging that. Also, just want to, certainly like all of us, we've certainly received questions, concerns, thoughts about just whether or not, if I chose to opt my child into a virtual or remote setting, that they're going to receive the attention that a student that is in the room or in the classroom would get. And so I appreciate that update. I know there will be more questions, surely, because there's much more granularity at a school level, but I do want to acknowledge that. One question I do have, which is, back to this virtual versus in-person piece relative to special education. I think there was a slide, slide 26, where we say full-time remote option is available for special education, McKinney-Vento, and newcomer. Can you or Dr. Morgan or Dr. Henderson talk a little bit more about what that means? Because I have received feedback that special education services particularly are just tricky in a virtual setting. And so could that be, I'd like to just
Yeah,
that a little more.
It's a great question. I will admit that it is highly recommended. One of the reasons why we are maximizing that in-person time is because based on the accommodations that we've seen in the case conferences, it is harder to do when it's remote. So we are definitely encouraging that takes place in person. But of course, there may be families that will choose for it to be remote, and so we will work as much as possible with those families. The beauty of special education is that each of those students have an individualized education plan where we can work on those accommodations and figure out how we would do that. I would imagine that in those situations, there will be some services, just as there were now when we were fully remote, where there will have to be some in-person touch points, such as some of the assessments, some of the therapy that goes on. Those have to be in-person services, and those were things we even outlined in this time we've been fully virtual. Not ideal. Just to reiterate, it's not ideal when it's remote, but that option is there for families, and we will work to accommodate.
Thank you. So, I mean, do you foresee a world where we are, and maybe this is already happening, where we're actually going to, and I see our special education educators are going to homes, residences, centers where students might be learning virtually? Is that in the cards?
I know when it came to our ESL population, that question came up because there was actually an assessment that all of our ESL, our new ESL students had to take in the first month of school, and we were enabling staff members to either the last resort was actually going to a home, but like if there were public places to meet where you can actually do that, we were encouraging that. Once again, we would have to approve all of those. It becomes a slippery slope with visiting families, but those options are available.
Right. I certainly want to acknowledge that requires some logistics there to make that happen. But I just recognize that in this time that we're in, I mean, I'm hopeful that, all options are considered and on the table when we think about how to ensure that our kids receive the services that they need. So I appreciate you sharing that. One question, you mentioned the assessment piece with NWEA. Maybe I missed this, but for students that are remote, I know that one of the concerns was just the fidelity, or maybe not the fidelity, but the security maybe even. There's many reasons that it's preferred to do these tests in person versus virtually, right? how do we feel about, we know we're going to have some students that are opting into the remote learning session. How do we deliver NWA? Is that similar to your comment about how we might have to just have that in-touch or that in-person experience because of that? Or is there a world where we're administering the test virtually?
Yeah. I'll start by talking about our formal assessments, and then I know Dr. Henderson's team has been collecting some information on what teams are doing now for those, for all of our remote students. And so when we return in person and we're doing the NWEA, we can administer it remotely. So for those small groups of students, it will actually still be at home. We will be able to do the assessment. I think the challenge came in when we were going to do it for our entire district and have to offer it that way. We were concerned at the amount of time we would be able to do that and do it well. Given that we pushed everything back, our team has actually been working with our tech to make sure we could come up with the protocols, come up with the different avenues we'll do. Some of the assessments we actually are creating testing hubs. So like Broad Ripple being a location where it would be like a satellite center where we may coordinate with families where they would actually come in to do their assessment. So we're working out what that will look like. The difference is it's a much smaller population due to the fact that we'll have several of our students back in person. And then some of those like state tests, mandated tests, like I know our seniors are about to take SAT next month, October 27th, I believe it is, and those will have to be in person. So there's just some things we can't get around. But I know Dr. Henderson's team has been collecting information of some of the formative assessments that our students are doing now in the virtual environment.
Sure. So with our new HMH adoption, there are some growth measures assessments that schools are using. And let me put the caveat that these vary campus to campus. So it's not like we could say, oh, let's just going to compare what everybody has taken. Also, our Eureka Math curriculum has some end of modules assessments that are being used. Some of the online learning platforms like Lexia, Dreambox, Achieve 3000 give assessments so they can then determine which questions or materials to give the students their prompts next. And so they do that based on what they fed into the system. Also at the secondary level, Achievement Net, ANET, you may have heard schools refer to, those are being used, and Achieve 3000 is in some of our high school programs, as well as at the lower grade levels. Teachers are conducting some running records, using Fontes and Pinnell to get some baseline reading levels, and then teachers are creating assessments. And so these are the types of formative assessments they use to share out with parents during PIT Day about how their students are currently performing as we have pushed back our NWEA windows.
Thank you for that.
And I might also add, I'll reiterate what Dr. Morgan shared around the middle of year window for NWA map. So starting November 9th, that's quite a bit earlier than is typical with the middle of year window for NWA. And so, assuming that we continue to move forward with the 19th, then we'll be getting this NWA data really, really closely behind that. So that's another, we wanted to move that up quite a bit.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I guess the one last question, comment, maybe more of a comment than anything, is just, I know we've been tracking, device distribution, attendance. We took enrollment count a couple weeks ago. I know that'll shake out for a while. But I think what I'm hoping that we're gathering is, that data, there's much more context to the data. When you look at a couple schools that have higher levels of attendance, we know that there are some schools that, at least a week ago when we met, we're still emerging with regard to their attendance rates, to increase them. My question is, or maybe my observation or my hope is, maybe that's a better way to put it, is that we're cutting that data, we're looking at sort of it in a different way in the sense of, what is the impact, what are we seeing from our Black and Brown students, our English language learning students, our special education students, particularly because we know that some of our kids are going to move into, our families have already made that decision to opt into the remote learning environment. And so sort of how are we continuing to build on that, learn from it, and apply it and adjust and iterate through this journey, because frankly, none of us know how long we may see this hybrid, virtual, in-person reality that we're in. And so my hope is that we're learning from that as we gather that data and to see if there are opportunities to supplement or augment or improve, the experiences, particularly for students that we know that are at the highest risk in our community. So more of a comment, I guess.
I just have a couple of quick questions. Dr. Morgan, you teased me in your presentation with that we're beginning to get data. I think when before we made the change to full virtual, we believed around 30% of our families were likely going to take virtual, if I remember that number correctly. And I know it's open till the 29th. Does it look anything consistent with that? I mean, as far as our planning purposes are.
Yeah, I can answer that. Right, so we're going to do another cut of the data tomorrow, and so we'll have a better answer to that question tomorrow. What I can say now is that it is looking like we are trending to where we will have more families that are wanting to be in person than at this same point in time in July, which is similar to as we talk or as I talk to other districts across the country. That is a national trend.
Shocking. The second thing, sort of stemming from your conversations, Commissioner Hawkins, is as I read my emails, I'm either brilliant or I'm an idiot, based on the emails that I'm receiving regularly. And the ones that called me an idiot were usually from my family. But the one consistent question, sort of that didn't stem from that we're making difficult decisions, but the one consistent question was sort of this desire to know, sort of, one, are we measuring? How can I track my students' progress? How can I track from last March to today if there is loss, and then what can I do? And that I would urge us, to the extent possible, between now and even the 29th, to do the type of explanation you just did for us, to sort of make sure, yes, those things are occurring. Yes, we're going to get that. Yes, we're doing those assessments, and we're going to get that data out to our families and our students, because that's been the one consistent across the board. We know as we make decisions, we're going to make people happy and make other people unhappy, but that's a consistent theme from the emails I've received. If there's no further questions, we do not need to take a board action on this tonight, because we have granted that authority to the administration to make these decisions. But I think it would be good for us to give and I don't know how to look at my fellow commissioners over the phone, but just to give a general consensus that we know this may change based on the data we close out on September 29th, but that we are generally in consensus that this is the way to keep moving. And I see the two commissioners in person. I think maybe for our commissioners on the phone, it'll do the speak now or forever hold your peace. Not from a continuing to adapt and change and have input on those adaptations and changes, but generally speaking, is everybody on the phone okay with moving as you have been presented this evening?
I consent. This is Commissioner Arnold. I'm very supportive.
Others okay?
I have no problems. This is Commissioner Gore with us proceeding to open our schools the way we have laid out here tonight.
This is Commissioner Slott, and I have no further questions. I think we're going to do the best we can. We'll tackle this the best we can and continue to build a community. And we're in this together. Thank you, as administration, for all their work they've done on this.
Or I'll assume your silence connotes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought see, that's what I'm saying. I don't know when I'm on mute, when I'm not. Yes, I agree 150%.
Perfect.
Keep moving.
Great. Thank you all very much. With that, we are at Commissioner comments section, and I'll do what I've been doing this evening. I'll go to the phone. Does any of our commissioners on the phone have any closing comments for this evening?
I do not.
This is Commissioner Arnold. I do not.
Going once? Going
Commissioner
twice?
Gore, no.
Commissioners, this is Commissioner Slack. I have no closing comments. Just that I want to continue the work that we're doing. I'm very proud of the administration, and I'm proud of the students, the teachers, everyone hanging in there and working together.
Any commissioners in the room this evening have closing comments?
I would just, I would just like to echo Commissioner Slack's words in that I'm really impressed with the thoughtful, I know it's all hard, but it's the thoughtful and comprehensive wraparound work that everybody's doing, considering parent input and teacher input and principals and all the leaders. And I'm happy to be here, actually, with such an intelligent crowd.
All right, well, nowhere to go but down, I guess, at this point, right? Yeah, I want to echo the same thing, Commissioner Collins and Commissioner Slack as well, that, just can't thank the administration enough for everything that has gone into this process and plan. And, so I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank our parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles and neighbors and everyone who's pitched in on the home and community front, particularly because this has been a challenge, no doubt. There's been good days and bad days and some crazy days, I'm sure, but just want to thank you for your patience. I want to thank you for your voice as well. Know that your feedback, your concerns, your questions, your outreach, those are seen and heard by this board and by this administration as well, and we appreciate that feedback. Also want to thank educators, principals, teachers, again, just for the monumental lift that you are undertaking right now. And you wear quite a few hats: educator, tech specialist, all the above. And so we just can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing. And can't wait. Actually, the other day I was driving into work and I started to see the yellow buses rolling. I think they're out doing their routes, looking at Scott Martin, which was exciting. I stopped and took a picture, then realized I'm not supposed to hold my phone, I think, while I drive, and I quickly put it away. But just excited to see, all of the efforts that have taken place moving into the space of now we're seeing a restart happen. And so, again, just want to thank Superintendent Johnson, who isn't here especially, and obviously wish her and her family the best possible during this difficult time. But just, again, thank you, administration, for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins, Commissioner Collins, and all the commissioners. I would be remiss if I didn't reiterate everything that the team has truly shown their stripes, and you all are amazing for the work you've done. The one addition I think I would have for one of our meetings in October would be as we get that after-action report. I think that's, if we all believe in transparency, that would be a good thing for us to have a short presentation on and put out there that sort of this is what happened, this is why it happened, and this is how we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. I want to point out that Joe Grammelsbacher, a IPS alum, has joined us while on a short break from his Ivy League education. It's a testament to what a geek he really is that he came to visit with us tonight while he's in town on leave. So, Joe, welcome back. And I also want to reiterate Commissioner Hawkins' thoughts and prayers to Superintendent Johnson's family and to her, and let her know that we're thinking about her and that based on what we've seen tonight, the system is in good hands right now. So thank you. Andrew, I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
Yep, just a few. So a couple quick reminders. We've mentioned it a few times this evening, but please tune into that Parent Institute this coming Monday, the 28th at 6 p.m. so you can sign up at myips.org for that virtual event. So again, we'll be going into more detail about academic model, the transportation and safety. And then as always, you can go to myips.org for additional information. We, as was mentioned, will put the deck that we went through this evening up on the website as well. And then for our parents, if you haven't done so already, please complete that e-learning transportation survey. I think we've touched on a few times just how important that data is to us as an organization as we continue to plan. And then I know Parent in Touch Day or PIT Day was yesterday, and so heard a lot of good things that came out of those conversations. So thanks to our families and teachers and principals and staff who engaged in that. And then this has been mentioned numerous times, but just want to extend sincerest gratitude to our teachers, principals, and staff for their continued commitment and flexibility. And then, of course, our families and students for their perseverance And that's all I have. So have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Andrew. I will alert everybody that apparently while we're in this meeting, the governor extended his emergency orders declaration while they are moving to stage 5. He continued to extend the emergency orders declaration to November 5th, 1st. And so as we have our meetings, one of the sort of requests of those is we have as few meetings as possible under the emergency orders. But so while our next scheduled meeting is our work session on Tuesday, October 20th, that may change. We will keep everybody's up to date as any of those things change. And then having completed all the items on the agenda, this meeting stands adjourned.